Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Left Hook Podcast, the first for 2025. And as always, joined by my co-host, James.
Comrade, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Yourself?
Very good, thank you. Very much looking forward to bringing in the new year with a strong left hook analysis.
Correct.
I think. And obviously seeing out last year, what a year it was.
It was.
I think we can say.
Yes, it was a jam-packed year.
Jam-packed year. We had bloody assassination attempts, successful assassinations, proxy war escalations, proxy war de-escalations, humanitarian disasters, political crises on every single continent.
Yeah. Elections all year round.
Elections. And it heralds, I guess, some interesting news coming into 2025, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. So, we were going to try and do a Christmas special. Unfortunately, we didn't get time to do that. But what we thought we'd do is choose a news story each from last year that we thought was probably the most significant or the most interesting, per se.
Yeah.
So, what was yours? What did you find to be the most significant story or event from 2024?
I wouldn't say, in terms of actual lasting significance, the one that I wanted to look at was not something that... everyone's completely forgotten about it. It may have current day ramifications.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what they are, but it's just completely flown under the radar. And I wanted to talk about it because it demonstrates a severe vulnerability that we have with our kind of global technological and information software systems that essentially run our entire global economy.
Yeah.
And that was the much forgotten about CrowdStrike IT system outing of July last year.
Yep.
So if anyone remembers, which, again, content amnesia, just in one ear, out the other ear, there's that much stuff going on. There was an outage, I think, for a couple of hours, I think it's about 8 hours or so, of primarily Microsoft systems. And these were managed by the slightly dubious intelligence contracting cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike.
Yeah.
And in that time, obviously, it shut down, especially in Australia, airports, hospitals, various kind of infrastructure systems that were using these software programs were all affected.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because no one's addressed it. We don't know why it happened. It was just completely covered up under the rug. Forgotten about. No one's talked about it, and no one, even from a domestic political perspective, has used it as for example, a stepping stone to look at, say, hey, what are we doing to shore up our information infrastructure?
Yep.
You know what I mean? I thought it was really interesting. And there were also just a few kind of how can I say, a few questionable things, a few questionable details surrounding it. The main one being that the Chief Security Officer, Sean Henry, who is ex-FBI agent of the company CrowdStrike, sold his $1.45 million worth of CrowdStrike shares on the Monday preceding, which no one seems to be talking about. I thought it was super dodgy, and obviously, look, maybe he just got lucky.
Yeah.
However, it is interesting that typically, if you're in a senior position of a company, you don't sell your shares while you continue to work there. You hold on to the shares.
Unless you know something's coming.
And even then, if you do know something's coming, you want to cash out, you can do that. But then it also indicates what was the purpose. I don't know. I literally have no idea. I haven't heard anyone talk about any sort of speculation. I do as well find interesting the history of CrowdStrike and their role in, for example, the Trump Russiagate scandal.
Yeah.
Where they were essentially outsourced by the FBI to do this digital forensics, and as well as another notable time when they came up and essentially seemed to be used for the purpose of undermining US-China relations by claiming that they had evidence of Chinese hackers, etc., etc. So, look, there's enough. I'm a pretty cynical, skeptical man, maybe to my detriment sometimes, but I thought that was just, too good to pass up. And there's enough dodgy stuff surrounding it, and additionally, it's completely been forgotten about. And if it happens again, if we have a similar outage in the future, what will we have learned from that? Because I'm sure that literally, if it's affecting hospital systems, this could potentially cost lives.
Yeah. As you said, it really demonstrated how fragile the modern kind of digital infrastructure and economy is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shut down and ground to a halt so quickly.
Are people backing away from, more integrated digital infrastructure. No, we're barreling further ahead.
Yep.
I'm personally looking forward to having my Neuralink chip in my brain shut down due to a bug at some stage in the near distant future, and I'll probably perish because there'll be a hydration glitch, perhaps, and I will not be able to. Software update to be frozen. What about you, Jordy? What stands out for you in 2024?
We had a lot to choose from, but one really stood out to me. Because I remember waking up Sunday morning. And my partner saying to me, they just tried to assassinate Trump. And I sort of rolled over halfway and said, what? There was a attempted assassination on Trump. And that really stood out to me because it was a turning point.
Sorry, which attempt, which one, bro? Which one are we talking about?
Attempt number one, Thomas Matthew Crooks.
Yep.
That was a turning point, in my opinion, for the Trump campaign, because that was when I think the momentum really shifted and we got that incredible picture of Trump sitting there defiantly, holding his fist up. Now I think, fight.
Yes,
blood dripping down his ear.
Fighting the establishment.
And the US flag in the background. It really captured, in my opinion, just the American political ethos and just how everything is just the spectacle that is US politics.
Yes.
And the spectacle that was his assassination.
It was incredibly spectacular.
Correct, yeah. And then him going to the Republican convention just, I think it was 3 days later, with the patch over his ear and just, it really was something else. And also the shooter, just, once again, we won't go into deep dive speculations here, but just the more you read about him, and not a lot has come out, none of it really adds up. It's quite a bizarre thing that a young 20-year-old boy with no real strong political views that was a registered Republican voter that had donated, I think, $15 to a Democratic, some sort of organisation associated with the Democrats, had donated $15 towards them, decided to climb up onto this sloped roof, evade police and evade state and federal police. Was able to get up on there, take a shot from 150 metres away with an AR-15 rifle, and had previously been rejected from the rifle club at his school. And the president of the club said that he was a lousy shot.
Interesting.
And just the entire thing, it was just really bizarre. Just none of it really kind of added up. And then they found the explosives in his car, and it was just...
Yeah, and he also fit the bill of like kind of being the perfect kind of loner outcast from society.
Correct.
Didn't have social media, I believe, which, look, isn't impossible in this day and age, but very, very unlikely. Didn't have any kind of online presence at all.
It was just, his backstory and the circumstances were just quite bizarre. And the fact that the Secret Service had him in their view, one of the snipers on the roof had him in the view for up to a minute. It was 30 seconds to me. It was a long period of time watching this person who they couldn't identify, commando crawling across a roof with a gun aiming at President-elect Trump. It was just, the entire thing was,
It was suspicious. And like you said, I'm pretty sure there was they talked about it afterwards, the division of responsibility. Well, the Secret Service covers this area, and then the local police cover this area, but this particular building,
was a black spot.
And we didn't have anyone on the roof because it was pitched at like a 3-degree angle, and we can't have people on the roof.
Yeah, that's right. And then when he was climbing up, everyone was yelling, hey, he's got a gun, he's climbing on the roof, nothing happened. It was just, the whole thing was very bizarre. And complete coincidence, because I think it was a coincidence, that he featured in a BlackRock advertisement, because they did they'd run an ad at his school appealing to teachers to, I think, donate more money into their student fund or teacher fund for retirement.
Obviously managed by BlackRock.
Which is managed by BlackRock. And it just happened to be that the ad that was run, Thomas Matthew Crooks was in the background, in the classroom, in the ad.
Absolutely.
Which is just,
wild.
It is wild.
And it's so fun to speculate about. Honestly, it's so much fun to speculate about. But like you said, it really was such a turning point. Because as soon as, I was probably the same as you, as soon as I heard that news and I saw that iconic photo of,
I knew it was game
of a modern-day American folk hero.
Correct.
The Don.
The Don.
You knew it was game over. He literally had it in the bag. From that moment on.
Yeah.
Bloody hilarious.
It was.
And also, what I thought was interesting as well is they killed him on the spot.
Yes. Yeah.
So, no court, no trial, no hearing, no further public.
Yeah, however, that does make sense. You're pointing a gun at President-elect.
It does make sense.
Yeah.
It does make sense. But again, the other guy... we're not going to get too deep in the weeds on stuff that happened months ago, but the other guy from the golf course, he didn't get shot straight away.
No, he didn't get shot straight away. I think they found him in a bush lurking with a gun, not actually aiming a gun
Yes,
at Trump.
of
But,
course.
Yeah, true. Anyway, anywho, so
Extrajudicial killings.
correct.
Yes.
So no, it was a fun year, an interesting year, and this year I imagine is going to roll on with more interesting events to come.
I think the insanity of last year
will roll over.
It will roll over and it will compound.
Correct.
And we will have even more insanity to report on. And obviously for content creators like ourselves, good content, however, not good for humanity as a whole.
That's right.
So
that's right.
We've got a big 2025 in Australia particularly.
Yes.
We have a big year coming up.
We do.
Yeah.
We've got a federal election coming up, which must be held by May 17th. So the date has not been announced yet. I assume I would imagine in the next fortnight, potentially it will. Because we've just seen already both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party trying to put forwards their policies and their pitch to voters as to why you should vote for us. So we've just seen that in the past week. So I imagine Albanese and the Labor Party will come out and give us a date shortly.
Yep.
And yeah, look, kind of, I guess, pulling everything apart, it's really the policies that they're running on which matter. Let's be honest.
It is.
It's not, in my opinion, it's not really about either of the men because I'm sorry, neither of them are particularly charismatic in my opinion. I don't really look at either of them and go, oh, what a great political leader. What a great statesman.
It's a great statesman. Well, Jordy, look, if I'm just your average everyday
punter,
if I'm just some average working class dog on the street, right, and I don't pay attention to mainstream media, so I don't get, I don't have access to any of the information about this, that the media pundits are spitting out, obviously trying to convince us one way or the other. Could you possibly give us a rough analysis on the policies that these guys are running on, and what is different, what's similar, and what do you think their strengths and weaknesses be?
Okay, so what I might do is start off with Labor. So Labor are kind of going with the stability, that we're stabilising the economy. We've seen inflation start to drop down to the, I think, 4% target rate. So they're saying that, look, we're going to stabilise the economy, inflation's going to come down, interest rates are going to come down soon. I think the RBA is meeting in a week or two, so potentially we might see interest rates drop, which will help the Labor Party. Aside from that, there are a couple of policies which stood out to me. First of all, they said they're going to wipe 20% debt off all tertiary loans, off university loans, and off trade support loans.
That's fantastic.
So, to all you young Aussie tradies out there who are looking to buy Hilarks, and you've got a trade support loan, and you're looking to buy a ute or four-wheel drive, if you vote Labor, they're going to wipe 20% off your trade support loan. So,
that's good.
Yeah, and I think that's good for most young people. Whether you went to university, you've got a trade, and you do have that debt, 20% is a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot to me.
Yep.
I'm going to take it.
Yeah, I'll take that.
It potentially might have bought my vote. But so that's the first thing. Also, as of 2026 or 7, they're going to put forwards another 100,000 free TAFE positions.
Beautiful.
Which I think is great.
Yep.
I think it's good to get people into TAFE if you're not going to go to university. Yep. It's a great pathway to get some education. And I think free TAFE for young people is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. And like you said as well, considering how many people, as it ties into that first policy, how many people are saddled down or even prohibited by the debt that they may incur into studying at TAFE. Obviously, TAFE's quite a bit cheaper than going to university here in Australia.
Yep.
But there is a certain level of prohibition that might make people think twice to pursuing, further education. And I personally think, I'm in agreement, that's a good thing. The more people that are educated, whether even it's vocational education, TAFE, university, that's a better thing. We have a smarter populace.
A skilled populace.
Better for the economy.
Yep.
And obviously then the more kind of skilled positions you have, the less you need to rely on like immigration, for example. Not that I'm anti-immigration, that I'm anti-immigration, but that's one of the
skilled jobs for skilled Australians.
Yep, that's it.
It's a good slogan. I might have to sell it to them.
Yeah, done. Maybe they'll give you a cut if they win.
Hopefully. So that's those two. Obviously, they're going to keep, I think, moving forwards with their Future Made in Australia, which is going to look at kind of rewiring the nation and trying to manufacture more key things that we need here in Australia and not rely on overseas supply chains, which I think is important.
Yep.
More investment into renewable energies. And so at that point, the renewable energies is where we now will pivot to what the Liberal Party are offering, because their major policy, going nuclear. Dado goes nuclear. He wants to build 7 nuclear reactors. I will not get into the weeds of this because it's like a 30-minute segment.
Yeah.
Just to cut it short, if the Liberal Party get in, they're going to push ahead with nuclear.
Yep.
7 reactors in Australia. From everything I've read from Michael West to other, I think, good independent journalists, people that do good independent analysis that aren't really kind of beholden to either party, it's not really a policy. It seems to have so many holes in it.
Well, I've seen as well, I believe the CSIRO, which is kind
Correct.
of our national scientific research
Yep.
body, they did a costing analysis of it, I believe, and they came out and said, yeah, look, it's not actually going to lower your power bills at all.
Yeah, that's right.
So in a time where Australia is a huge energy exporter, yet Australians have some of the highest power bills in the world,
Yep.
this investment, which is going to cost billions and billions and billions of dollars, isn't going to have a tangible effect on you or me
Yep.
at the end of the day. Unless, of course, perhaps
Yeah.
they build a reactor in your community and you have the joy of getting that third hand that you've always wanted.
Yeah, so that is his kind of the Liberal Party's major policy. Obviously, they are just going to reignite the culture wars. We've got Australia Day coming up next weekend, and Dutton has said if re-elected, they will legislate that it is mandatory for all councils to hold the Citizenship Day on Australia Day.
Good man.
Which is bizarre because at the moment, I'm pretty sure it's like law or it's just kind of standard procedure to hold the ceremony 3 days before or after or on the day.
Yep.
So
Well, it's a public holiday, isn't it?
what, the 26th?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, but it's just kind of standard that councils do it. And he's saying, he's like, no, it has to be done. He's obviously, and he's really kind of just, he's going to use the culture wars and the whole Labour Week on the economy.
It's funny you say that.
Yeah.
Because to my knowledge, under the current Labor government, which I have many criticisms of, we both criticise them quite robustly, shall I say, on this podcast, Australia does have the second best managed economy in the world at the moment.
Correct.
I believe.
Yeah.
So, again, the fallacy of the Labor are poor economic managers, I think under a bit more scrutiny doesn't really hold up.
No, so I'm getting to that.
Yeah, please do.
He's really running on that. But the whole problem is that interest rates globally have went up over the past few years since the end of it's not the end of the pandemic yet, but since the pandemic they've went up. Inflation's went up. It really is a global issue.
Yes.
It's not significant to Australia whatsoever. So it's just ridiculous. And it's funny that Labor always seems to get in when there is economic turmoil.
Yep.
And there's global upheaval. You look at the global financial crisis. Kevin Rudd came in.
Best managed economy in the world. Wayne
Correct.
Swan, I believe, at the time.
Yep. Liberal Party during COVID, their stimulus came out of the Labor Party. That was a policy designed by the Labor Party that they used. And then once again, going into a great inflationary crisis globally, Labor's in power.
Of course.
So, and it's really easy then, obviously, for the Liberals to just attack them on it.
Yeah. Well, it does seem to be like, for lots of Australians, it does seem to be actually like this election outcome could be quite consequential going forwards into the 21st century. You know what I mean? As in setting our path and our course that our nation will take and the economic outlook that your average everyday Aussie will have.
Yeah.
If that kind of makes sense.
Okay, so being completely non-partisan, I want Labor to get back in. I just want to see what else they can do, what else they can legislate. Because I just do think as like a machine that produces policy,
Yes.
I think they're far better, and it would just be interesting to see what they do. Obviously, a lot of the foreign policy, a lot of the defence policy, we will sit here and criticise.
Yep.
It's really easy to because there's not a major difference between the two parties.
Yep.
They're going to both go ahead with AUKUS. They are both going to cover for whatever America decides to do over the next few years. We'll likely support it. But I do think that as far as national policy, concerning the economy, the environment, energy, things like that, I do think Labor do a better job, and it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah.
If the Libs get back in, I am going to keep my eyes open and have a look at these nuclear reactors because that's all we can. That's all we really can look forward to analysing at the moment. Because apart from that, it is just reactionary culture war garbage.
It is and so like you said, Peter, for example, one aspect that is being hammered in the right wing press in Australia, which is probably 85% of our media, is the Australians are sick of woke culture.
Dutton's going to war.
Dutton's going to war with wokeness, starting with Australia Day.
Yeah.
Now, like that alone, if that is a main policy platform that you're running on. Like you've scraped through the bottom of the barrel and you're in the dirt beneath the barrel to scrape something out.
Do you know what I do like about the Australia Day in that case?
Yes.
Is just him putting a gun to people's heads and be like, you will celebrate Australia Day.
Yeah.
You will cook that barbecue and you will drink that beer.
Yes, that's it. You will drive around in your foreign-made car and yell at foreigners because you're a patriotic Australian.
Yeah, that's right.
That was obviously a facetious joke. But again, funnily enough, for those internationally, our National Day, Australia Day, is the 26th of January. So it is actually coming up. So usually the month of January in Australia, in between your end of year, Christmas, New Year's, and Australia Day, not a great deal happens. Like the country's kind of still half asleep. And
it's 40 degrees.
Yeah, it's 40 degrees. In Seppo units, that's like 110 degrees. Seppo units. And it's funny because this has become obviously the hill that the culture warriors are willing to die on.
Yeah.
I'd note that the 26th of January doesn't actually really have much historical significance for the nation state of Australia because it signifies the day that the Botany Bay colony was founded.
The New South Wales colony.
New South Wales colony. It wasn't actually a national holiday up until, I believe, the 90s. Mm-hmm. And so I actually don't know when it was before that. I wasn't alive.
Yeah.
But even then, you think you could just maybe pick something like even the Day of Federation, when Australia as a nation was actually founded.
Yes, which I think everyone can get behind. The fact that it was the Federation of Australia.
Yeah, as opposed to the founding of New South Wales. And that's the problem with New South Wales. It's full of New South Welshmen.
Yes.
So that's that. That says it all for me.
As far as a day goes, what do you think Australia Day should be?
Well, Jordy, I'm glad you asked, mate. I think Australia Day... Look, we all know Australia's not a real country. Our international audience knows that. I've lived here for 28 years.
It's a psyop.
It is the nation state is a psyop itself. So I think in the spirit of not taking things too seriously, because we shouldn't, I think the day should be changed to May the 8th.
Okay, what's that?
Or it has no relevance to anything.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that if you say it quickly, May 8, mate... That is about as Aussie as you can get. It's a piss take.
Yep.
It's completely inoffensive to every single cultural or ethnic group in Australia. And I think it just captures why the country's a joke. Yeah. Our existence is a joke. Why don't you make our national holiday a joke and make it get 3 levels deep on the meme? Hilarious. If anyone can give me a better day, I'm open. I'm all ears. What about you, Jordy? Considering this is going to be a key political topic.
It is, that's right. I guess the Day of Federation, I imagine so.
Yep.
Which off the top of my head, I cannot tell you what it is.
That's all right.
I should know this as well.
Again, Australia, joke of a nation.
Yeah. So...
but because this will back to being a bit more serious, we'll be covering this a lot in the next couple of months, and we will see a reactionary ramping up in the media.
Yeah, of course.
There will be so much mudslinging from all sides. It's going to be outrageous.
It is. It's really going to come down to a couple of seats in New South Wales, whether the Till Independents retain their seats from the Liberal Party, whether the Libs take back a few outer suburb seats off Labor, especially in New South Wales, I believe, maybe a couple in Western Australia. Seems that South Australia is going to remain pretty strong as far as federal seats go for Labor. Peter Malinauskas, the South Australian Premier, seems to be pretty popular. So I think that'll kind of overflow into the federal election a little bit. So
I also find, again, this is my own personal editorial opinion, I find Peter Dutton just a thoroughly not very charismatic man.
He's not, but
yes,
that means nothing. And this is something I've changed about. When he first became leader of the Liberal Party, I was like, there's no way he will become Prime Minister. There's no way your everyday Aussie battler looks at him and goes, that looks like an Australian leader.
He inspires me.
No, but do you not realise...
He owns a shopping centre. He's worth $400 million. He is a CIA, deep state ghoul.
Putting that aside,
yes,
he's very intelligent, I've come to realise. I've listened to him talk a lot in the past 6 months. He's very quick on his feet. He's very good at playing the reactionary attack dog.
Yeah.
And I don't think people should underestimate him for that.
No.
He is very smart and he's very cunning as well. Also, I don't know who did this, whether it was someone in his PR team. They gave him a really good pair of glasses and it changed his entire look.
It does,
Honestly, the fact that
you're
he
right,
has
you're right,
no eyebrows, looks like Voldemort, doesn't matter anymore because he has glasses that make him look just a little bit more kind of put together.
A little bit more intelligent.
And
he doesn't require glasses, does he?
No, I'm not entirely certain, but I've just noticed that.
It's funny that he started doing it recently.
Correct, yeah. It's really changed his image. But glasses aside, he is very cunning.
He's cunning.
He is very cunning.
He is very cunning. And that, look, not a good thing for humanity, I think, at the end of the day, but, I mean, far out, we'll see.
No, we don't want cunning leaders.
No, you want smart leaders.
We want visionaries.
Yeah, you want visionaries, dude.
Yeah.
You want Mecha Stalin to come back and lead Australia. That's what I think. Anyways, look, we'll be covering this for the rest of the election lead-up.
Yeah, and just quietly, look, there's someone I want to talk to about the nuclear policy.
Mm-hmm.
We are both refrigeration mechanics. We understand a little bit when it comes to thermodynamics and physics. Bare basics, I'd say. I have somewhat of a good idea. I don't have heap strong opinions on this. Mm-hmm. There is someone that I know who has a YouTube channel who I'm in contact with that knows a lot more about this than I do. And I want to reach out to him and maybe get him on and have a chat to him because I think he could kind of just cut through the nonsense.
Yeah, probably provide a bit more depth to our analysis as well.
Correct, because I think we can give the more kind of political analysis of the policy and things like that, but I think he will potentially give us a bit more of the actual technical details.
Yeah.
So I'd like to have a chat with him. I think that would be really good. Mm-hmm. And also, I think we, this year, are going to try and get out prior to the election and just have a talk to some people on the streets here in the city about what they think about the upcoming federal election and see the difference between, look at what the policies are being proposed by both the two parties and what people actually know about.
Yes.
Because I think you find there's a big gap there.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, everyone.
Yeah.
And we'll be looking forward to that as much as you guys will be, I'm sure.
So, what's been happening in the past few weeks,
mate?
Because sorry to stop you. No. We do have Trump's inauguration tomorrow. Is it? I think it's the 20th.
Tomorrow. Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yeah.
So what's been happening? Talk to me,
dude. There's been a lot going on.
Yeah.
So, but again, in classic Trump fashion, before he's even gotten into office, he is getting in and swinging a big appendage around the place.
Yeah.
And it is hilarious how that man plays the media like an absolute fiddle.
Yeah.
Whatever he says, he can be just making a post on his Truth Social. He can be at some neocon convention, and even these most insane talking points that he comes up with immediately get absorbed by the media machine, the pro and anti-Trump media team, and they essentially synthesize his shit talking and his shit posts into reality.
Yeah.
It is fantastic.
And there's been quite a few from the past. I think the past week.
Since 2016, dude.
Yeah, but specifically in the past week, there's been some real interesting ones, hasn't there?
So, in terms of the US's position overseas, Trump has talked very much about, obviously, he wants to wrap up the war in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. He wants an end to the conflict in the Middle East. And he wants to kind of obviously reposition to take down China and be in a bit more of a competitive position against the Chinese. So I do find it funny. Now, I personally don't think the war in Ukraine will get wrapped up with any sort of,
definitive peace deal.
Yeah, definitive peace deal. I think the conflict in the Middle East will only get worse.
Yeah.
So I think he has successfully fooled his MAGA base once again.
Yeah.
However, he's running on the old, we're going to bring everything back to America, make America great again.
Yeah.
Start focusing more on the Western Hemisphere. I guess you could interpret that as like a Monroe Doctrine 2.0. However, what he's done, he came out in a very public statement and said, we are going to annex Canada, make it the 51st US state. We're going to annex Greenland. We're also going to possibly invade Mexico, rename the Gulf of Mexico, and annex Panama. This is huge, if true, Jordy.
It is.
Because, again, all the MAGA kind of, your kind of populist right-wing commentators online, they're all like, yeah, we need to get out of Ukraine. They're kind of a bit up and down on both sides on the Palestine-Gaza issue.
Yeah.
No one really wants war with Iran. But then as soon as he goes to annex Greenland, it's like, yeah, make America great again. Let's annex Greenland.
Yeah. So he's referred to Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau, the outgoing Prime Minister, as Governor Trudeau.
Yes, he has.
Yeah.
And Trudeau, in his infinite cuckery, hasn't really had much of a response either. I'm going to go over these one by one because I'm very keen to have a laugh at the comedic aspect of this, but there are, I think, some very interesting geopolitical and strategic reasons why he's chosen these particular areas.
Yeah.
So,
because I think you're highlighting there is the fine line between him being a blatant imperialist and a shit talker, and how those lines intersect.
yes.
And I think there's a little bit of truth to both of them.
There is. And look, and do you know what? We can actually, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. If we can twist his logic, so obviously we're going to make America great again, we're not going to go overseas, but if you just expand America's land borders, then we're making America great domestically, even though it's in Greenland. So maybe he's playing with some funky logic. I want to talk about, so Canada, firstly. Canada is obviously to the north of the United States. It is a massive country. I'm pretty sure its land area is larger than the continental United States itself. Canada, the reason, obviously Canada has a small population, largely uninhabited. You know, the north of the nation is just like a frozen wasteland, essentially.
Correct.
Interestingly, what it does have is access to the Arctic, and this will play into Greenland as well. So Canada as well is a resource supplier, has lots of oil, has lots of minerals and resources. It also has deals with Chinese companies, for example. So I think whether they actually officially annex it or not, I think more US control over Canadian resources is going to be very important for the future. Canada also, I believe, along with Russia, has the largest freshwater supplies in the world. And as our nation, as the globe, is going to start increasingly fighting over water, which we already do see to a certain extent, to water resources, this will become even more important. It also will allow the United States access to the Arctic Circle. So the land mass with the most access to the Arctic Circle is Russia, obviously, and we've seen part of their kind of strategic policy going forwards is they have invested in icebreakers, Arctic stations, that sort of stuff. And so they are poised to dominate Arctic trade routes. And as we fall further into our spiral of global warming and the Arctic melts more resources, like I'm saying, water resources, trade routes, etc., etc. So being the United States, they can't be beaten. No one can be better than them in any particular area. So if the Russians are starting to have Arctic sea routes, the Americans will have to have Arctic sea routes as well. I actually have a quick map here as well that I just wanted to show you, and I'll put this up. So this is a map of North America, and we can see how the United States is here positioned. Please excuse me for one sec. We can see how the United States is positioned, pardon me. So obviously you already have Alaska up the top. One thing that you'll notice as well is that strip of land there. That's called the Alaskan Panhandle. American states, they call it a panhandle because it is like the handle of your frying pan, right? So it's like a Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle. I think there might be a Florida one as well.
So this is a strip between the west coast of America all the way up to Alaska.
Canada does have a little bit of Pacific coast, as you can see there. But it's interesting how in drawing up the map, they have severely restricted Canada's access to the Pacific. And I think that was very deliberate, of course, as well. Because it, again, further entrenches their supremacy as a Pacific nation. Up here, we have Greenland. I want to move on to Greenland next. Greenland is part of Denmark. So it's an autonomous region it's technically part of the North American continent. It's on that like tectonic plate. However, it is governed by the Danish. How they got how they govern that, I actually have no idea. I'm not sure the history of it, to be honest. I think it might go back to Viking times or whatever. Don't quote me on that one. However, there's a reason that Greenland is obviously important for a prospective US empire. It has not only all the things we just talked about, Arctic access, fresh water supplies, it also has a lot of minerals. Here is a map that I found online, and it just shows mineral resources all over the island. You've got iron, gold, uranium, zinc, copper, as well as other rare earths. So I think what's quite funny about this as well is he's blatantly come out and just said, I'm not going to do the Trump impression, but he goes, yep, we're going to annex Greenland, to which the Danish Prime Minister has come out, and I'll play her response here, because you really can't demonstrate how subservient these people are to US empire. She doesn't come out and say, she doesn't even like necessarily protest the idea. Let's just watch. I think it's important to keep in mind that it's good, on the one hand, that there is a growing interest from the American side in what is going on, also in the North Atlantic Ocean and in the Arctic, because some of the tensions we see in other parts of the world are starting to come to the Arctic area. So I, as a very close ally to the United States, think there is a reason to be pleased with the growing interest from the USA. But it has to go off in a way that is respectful towards the population of Greenland. And we must cooperate in the same way we used to, among other things, in NATO and other international fora. Hilarious, dude. She can't even say no. She can't even just say, look, we prefer you didn't do that. She has to come out and say, oh, look, well, it's good you're giving it attention. I'm not sure where this woman's been in the last 150 years. If the Americans have their eye on you, that is not a good thing. That is terrible, dude. As soon as they they focus in on you, game over. So what I'm going to start seeing, because I've like tried to play this scenario out in my head a little bit, right? Greenland does not have Islamic extremists or neo-Nazis, so it's going to be really hard to find a political bloc in Greenland that they will be able to harness to essentially get used as a wedge to further drive them away from the Danish government. I think what will happen, honestly, is...
So we're not going to see, like, Viking Islamists or extremists?
Oh, well, it'd be funny, wouldn't it?
It'd be good crossover.
It'd be good crossover. I think what will happen is the US will just continually put more and more money into civil society organisations in Greenland. So I think the population of Greenland's about 55,000.
So like a slow kind of NGO-style coup.
An NGO-style coup, like a proper colour revolution. It's going to tick all the colour. And if they don't call it the Green Revolution, they're missing out on a fantastic opportunity, as it is Greenland. But I think we're going to start seeing maybe LGBT rights groups starting to protest against the authoritarian treatment of the Danish government. Denmark, which is a notoriously authoritarian and regressive reactionary nation. But I think they might not just outright buy the country, but I think they're going to put that much investment into it and have that much control over the industry.
They just really need corporate control over the resources.
Exactly. And they already do have some investment in Denmark as well. I think what's going to be telling, though, is how the indigenous Greenland population reacts, because as we know, the United States has a history of looking after and treating indigenous populations with great respect. So I think that is going to be I think that's going to be a source of friction, and how they overcome that. I do, however, think that this, like, Greenland is going to get sucked into the US orbit. He said it. Just the fact that he has said the words, he has synthesized the reality that will come into being.
Correct. What I would just say is I don't think we really even have to speculate, because you should just take it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, we be as well play it straight from the horse's mouth.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you. Many things are happening that are exciting.
Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
What is the strategy?
Yeah. I can't assure you. You're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this. We need them for economic security. It might be that you'll have to do something. Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. And they've abused it. They've abused that gift. It should have never been made, by the way. Giving the Panama Canal is why Jimmy Carter lost the election, in my opinion.
Your position is clear, but have you directed your staff to take specific actions to drop plans? And can you elaborate again? You didn't rule out military coercion.
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time.
Are you also considering military force to annex and acquire Canada?
No, economic force, because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. We're going to be changing, sort of the opposite of Biden, where he's closing everything up, essentially getting rid of $50 to $60 trillion worth of assets. We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which has a beautiful ring that covers a lot of territory. The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name. Before it started, I can tell you that. The deal could have been made just by an average deal maker. Deal could have been made on that. And Mexico has to stop allowing millions of people to pour into our country. They can stop them. And we're going to put very serious tariffs on Mexico and Canada, because Canada, they come through Canada too. And the drugs that are coming through are at record numbers.
Yeah, look, that was some quality. That was some quality statesmanship.
It was.
He's just. You can't fault that man. Like, he's so outrageous, dude. I hate all his policies. Literally talking about just annexing like countries, but just the way it's hilarious. He's unlike anyone else. He does deserve the presidency.
He does. He does.
But look, because he's posturing up to Mexico as well. But we start on Panama first. So obviously the Panama Canal was built with, I believe it was French and American capital, using Panamanian labour.
Yep.
It was considered almost impossible to do before it was done, essentially. And up until 1999, like I said...
Sorry to cut you off. I believe America went in there and just colonised the place and wiped all the indigenous population out and cleared it.
The history of this is really funny. So after the north of the South American continent got independence from Spain, Panama was originally part of Colombia. So you had Gran Colombia, which was like modern-day Ecuador, Venezuela, and Colombia, and then they all kind of broke off into their own kind of constituent republics, and then Panama was part of Colombia, and it was known as the Panama Isthmus.
Yeah.
And this has been similar to the Suez Canal, where you think, just in terms of shipping trade, instead of taking a ship all the way around the bottom of the South American continent, you can just go straight through. So this is an infrastructure project that was all the, especially going from the east coast of the United States into the Asian market.
Yes.
It was a big goal for US capital, and they did pull it off. But it was literally the Panama Canal zone, which is like a bit of land on either side of the canal, was completely controlled by the US military. I think like up until 1999. So we're saying we gave it back to them. It is on their land.
Yeah.
And the US has invaded Panama. They invaded Panama to take out Noriega, who was their CIA military drug trafficking dictator that they installed in the first place. So it's not like they... this claim, this entitlement they have to that little patch of waterway isn't new.
No, it's not.
And it will, like, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they did a blatant military intervention again in Panama.
Yeah.
And also to give the Americans a little win, give the neocons a little, like,
as you said, they've done it previously.
They've done it previously.
It's part of the imperial history.
Yes. I want to talk about Mexico as well.
Yeah.
Mexico has, essentially since the 1990s, has always kind of been, since like NAFTA especially, Mexico has really been not an extension of the United States, but it has been like quite subservient to the United States. So obviously America has outsourced lots of their labour, lots of their, for example, manufacturing to Mexico. They have interest in keeping the wages low in Mexico so their businesses can make more profits. And they also, import cheap Mexican labour, paying them Mexican wages. So it's funny that this is being discussed now, because under the last under the last government, so the current leader of Mexico, Julia Sheinbaum, she is the successor of AMLO, who's a very popular progressive government, and they have implemented massive reforms in Mexico. They're actually, Julia Sheinbaum is the most popular leader on earth. She has besides obviously Kim, in North Korea, who has 100% approval, but she's got like 80% approval rating. Yep. So God forbid any government in the West has 80% approval rating. That would just be foreign. It'd be impossible. But she has done this. She's achieved this by essentially just implementing and continuing through with policies that benefit the everyday Mexican. Yep. So like massive increases in wages amongst Mexican workers, more economic development, further eradication of illiteracy, poverty, that sort of thing. These really quite impressive programs. Mexico's a huge country with a massive population, and this is very important. It's also interesting to note that under the government before Lopez Obrador, Felipe Calderon, he essentially militarized the war against the cartels, which it resulted in a huge spike in cartel violence. So the modern kind of cartel situation was a product of that.
Yep.
And that also included a further integration of the Mexican and American national security states. So it's funny that these really militaristic cartel-enabling policies of the last government were not criticised by the United States, but now you have a popular leader who is progressive, who is trying to obviously get the national wealth of Mexico and use that for the betterment of the Mexican individuals, Mexican working class. As soon as a person like her gets into power,
The pressure campaign.
And we've seen the Americans talk about, oh, look, we've got to have to invade Mexico to get to the cartels. But it's funny because this is specifically to that, to what he said there about renaming the Gulf of Mexico. This is how Julia Scheinbaum, the president of Mexico, reacts. The United Nations recognizes the name Gulf of Mexico. But next, why don't we call it Mexican America? It sounds nice, doesn't it? Since 1607, the Constitution of Apansingan was Mexican America. So, let's call it Mexican America. So, Scheinbaum, incredibly based words, essentially telling the Americans to get bent, which is an incredibly, like a brave response, and good on it. And you can see exactly why the racist, misogynistic, imperialist, capitalist US ruling class cannot handle something like that.
And just contrast it to the leader. Was that the Danish Prime Minister, or was that the leader of Greenland?
No, the Danish Prime
Minister.
Minister.
The Danish Prime Minister, and her just be like, yeah, look, I'm really happy that you guys are talking about Greenland.
Talking about annexing, Insane,
massive difference between the two. Incredible.
Massive
it is, isn't
difference. And look, I actually think that this will be something that unfortunately will actually be coming into fruition. So all the Russia hawks are like, oh, Russia, this is just Putin's imperialist land grab in eastern Ukraine.
Yeah.
They will be cheering on the US annexation of Greenland and Panama.
Yeah.
Hilarious. We'll be covering this story as it develops over the course of 2025.
Definitely. All right, well, we should probably wrap it up shortly, but there's one major story that we need to address that's just been really breaking news from the end of last week.
Absolutely.
And that is the ceasefire in the Middle East.
Yeah, right.
So after what I believe would be, 15 months now of war in Gaza?
Exactly 469 days.
Okay.
Yes, to my calculations.
469 days of slaughter and genocide taking place. We now have a ceasefire between the Israelis and Hamas. And this came into effect when?
I believe it's today.
Okay.
So it's been talked about quite a bit over the last week. It's been speculation. Been details being released. But I think it was announced 2 days ago officially that, the actual the representatives from each country were meeting. So it's essentially backed by the United States and by Qatar, who are the two backers of either respective side. So you have obviously the US being the money teat for the Israeli Zionist entity, and you also have the backers of Qatar, of Hamas, which are Qatar, of the political body. Interesting to note, not Iran, because Hamas are not backed by Iran, just to dispel some Zionist propaganda.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Is this not the same peace deal that's been in work for the past 6 months at least now?
I believe since May 27th, 2024. They originally had this same ceasefire agreement in place, which the Israelis just rejected. And I want to talk about what what details it actually contains, and then we'll talk about some of the other kind of ramifications as to why. So essentially, it's the groups have met and they've kind of come to a consensus agreement that what it will essentially do, it'll break down into different phases. So obviously, you have immediate. First and foremost, you have immediate withdrawal of Israeli forces. You have the prisoner exchange, which will happen after that, and then you'll have kind of the repositioning of and the withdrawal of more Israeli forces essentially into pre-designated areas around the Gaza Strip, for example. Also, the opening of the Rafah border crossing, which will allow much-needed aid into the Strip to the incredibly malnourished population there as well. And also, kind of last but not least, like getting all the wounded civilians out and then returning all the unarmed, internally displaced people. So obviously Israel has a lot of hostages, Palestinian prisoners that have been kept in their kind of dungeons long before October 7th happened. And obviously Hamas has the Israeli prisoners that they captured, and that'll be the leverage. So I actually have the numbers here. So I think it works out to... I think it's like every Israeli prisoner, there's about 33 Palestinian prisoners or something like that. And they're obviously going to prioritise the women and the children, the elderly, etc., etc. I think, so we've already seen there's a lot of backlash to this in Israel itself, notably Smotrich and Ben Gvir, two of our favourite Zionist nutcases that we've covered quite regularly on this pod. So they both, I know Ben Gvir has actually resigned, so he's no longer in government. And I believe he's withdrawn his party from the governing coalition. So I think this will, I'm not sure on the domestic political situation, but this will cause a governmental crisis in Israel. Because that has always been his threat. He said, look, if you don't allow me, because like Benjamin Netanyahu is a pretty Machiavellian, not very pleasant right-wing political figure. But he is a centrist in Israel. The people that are so much further to the right of him, and obviously he doesn't have widespread support. So in order to keep his coalition government together, he's had to essentially kowtow to what these extremists want, and which has then pushed their policies further and further to the right. So I'm not sure if this will kind of precede a domestic crisis within Israel itself, but I know for a fact Ben Gvir has resigned. I'm not sure about Smotrich.
I've seen that Netanyahu now will be governing with a very slim majority.
Very slim majority, yes. I think that I personally do not think this ceasefire will last. I think we can be very happy because obviously the millions of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have just been so brutalised that from a base humanitarian perspective, we should all be celebrating the fact that this is happening. So at least for the time being, there's a cessation of hostilities. The bombs will stop for a bit, the soldiers will pull out, and then you'll be able to have, and the aid will be able to come in. So that's some relief, and I reckon that is amazing. I think we have to look at why did the Israelis choose to do this now as opposed to doing it in May? I think, this is my analysis, please chime in, Joride. I think obviously their military position, they haven't actually been able to meet their military objectives. Their objectives were to eliminate Hamas and therefore, and also kind of the subtext, ethnically cleanse all of the Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip into the Sinai. They have not been able to defeat Hamas. I am going to play a clip of outgoing US Secretary of State and wet roll of paper towel, Anthony Blinken.
Our friend Butcher Blinken, discussing how this has actually strengthened Hamas.
In the West Bank, Israel is expanding official settlements and nationalizing land at a faster clip than any time in the last decade, while turning a blind eye to unprecedented growth in illegal outposts. Violent attacks by extremist settlers against Palestinian civilians have reached record levels. We've long made the point to the Israeli government that Hamas cannot be defeated by a military campaign alone, that without a clear alternative, a post-conflict plan, and a credible political horizon for the Palestinians, Hamas, or something just as important and dangerous, will grow back. That's exactly what's happened in northern Gaza since October 7th. Each time Israel completes its military operations and pulls back, Hamas militants regroup and reemerge because there's nothing else to fill the void. Indeed, we assess that Hamas has recruited almost as many new militants as it has lost. That is a recipe for an enduring insurgency and perpetual war.
Wow, it's bizarre. It's almost like you and I were talking about this as it was happening.
Yes, funnily enough, who would have predicted?
I know.
But also, look, don't take his kind of veneer of civility and humanitarian concern seriously. He has been the one enabling this from the absolute get-go. He has been the primary driver.
It has.
Joe Biden has been sedated in a nursing home somewhere, and this is the man. He is an ardent Zionist. He's talking about, we need to stop these. No, we need to stop the land grabs by militant settlers. Bro, you have enabled them. You have done nothing to stop them.
Yeah.
There is a reason you're not going to be Secretary of State anymore, and he will have a legacy of this genocidal conflict on his hands as one of the primary culprits.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Sorry, got a bit worked up.
But he even says it there himself. He goes, "We warned the Israelis that Hamas would return to the Strip, that you could not wipe them out.
Exactly.
Another insurgency would return."
And that's why he allowed them to just keep doing what they wanted to do.
So what this ceasefire, for me, has signalled is that it really is America that pulls the strings, not the other way around.
Yes.
It is is it the dog that wags the tail, or the tail that wags the dog? And this has really been disputed over the past year since the war really began. And I think this shows you exactly how America does control Israel. They pull all the strings and all the shots. And what I wanted to ask you, because I think this is significant, Trump's inauguration tomorrow.
Yes.
Trump's envoy, who sat down with Netanyahu, who, from my understanding, applied lots of pressure to the ceasefire. And why now?
I think there's possibly a few factors.
Do you think the incoming administration really did this? Do you think it's their ceasefire? Or do you think it's Blinken and the Biden administration trying to get a last political win before they're pushed out?
I don't think that my opinion personally, I don't think that Blinken or the outgoing Biden administration can really do anything. I think they're trying to take this kind of last little.
But they could have stopped the bombs.
Well, they could have, but they're not going to.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that Trump, he is going to be a lot more willing to actually put pressure on, whereas the Biden and the outgoing Democrats weren't. I believe that as well, you don't, from a domestic political point of view, you do not want this absolute morass, this foreign policy disaster on your hands when you take office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it starts back up in a month's time afterwards. You can't have that now. So you want to start with with a clean slate, essentially, or what looks like a clean slate.
Yeah.
I also want to point out that I saw a article from like 2008 or 2009 that someone had screenshotted and posted online about how the Israelis were withdrawing all their forces from Gaza and ceasing all kind of like hostilities in the lead up to the Obama inauguration. So I think it's a bit of both. So I think Trump's...
It's the Americans telling them.
It is the Americans telling them, but as well, I think the Israelis understand how useful they are to the empire, and they need to give a little bit back, because they understand domestically, the American domestic population and the Israeli domestic population are are quite different things.
What I think is clear, though, is that Trump's envoy went there and he put some cards on the table.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of those cards could be, this is just speculation, is normalization with Saudi Arabia. And potentially a confrontation with Iran.
Yes.
And or a combination of both of them.
Yep.
And or, as Blinken just pointed out there, is the increased settler violence in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and whether they are going to formally allow the Israelis to annex that, sweep that under the carpet, and, as I said, potentially provide some of those other deals into it.
Yeah, well, look, I think probably all of those things are very likely. Like, Trump's a Zionist. He's probably more of a.
I don't think he is in some ways. I don't know, because I don't think
I don't
think he's an ideologue. I don't think he's a Zionist. I think he just knows they're important to the empire.
Exactly. Yes, and he is more transactional.
Correct.
Because again, the Adelsons have funded his campaign.
That's right.
His Jared Kushner, did the Abraham Accords. They personally have money involved in the Israel project, shall we say, not just the kind of ideological zealotry that Biden and Blinken had.
But it does show you, though, how this deal was pushed, I think, by Trump, and also about how it was America that was supporting the slaughter the entire time.
The whole time.
This could have ended months ago. It should have never began in the first place.
Never began. The Democrats could have got there, could have put Netanyahu's balls in a vice and squeezed it and said, stop it.
And I think this will go down as Biden's legacy. I wasn't alive for the Bush administration, for Bush Jr.'s administration, obviously during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, but this is the worst administration I've ever seen. The most incompetent. The Jake Sullivans, the Anthony Blinkens, the Bidens, I don't really have words to describe them, because it's honestly that sad. They are just so They're empty vessels.
They are empty vessels, and I think that's one of the reasons. I think one of the primary reasons they lost is just no conviction for anything.
No.
You know, he's saying one thing, doing another. You know, at least Trump says he's going to annex Greenland. He's probably going to do it. You know, it's just like, oh, we need to help the Palestinians while supplying bombs. You can't win on both sides because you're going to get skewered by both sides.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention as well that Israel has a history of not complying with ceasefires. So ever since the ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon,
Yes.
they have bombed Lebanon every single day since then. You have and
It's just more low intensity warfare.
yes, and it's bringing it back down, like you said, to a lower intensity. But as well, their military was getting like their asses handed to them. Pardon my
There's
language. They could not.
500 Israeli soldiers dead.
I've heard.
in the
I
past
reckon it's
year.
probably higher, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've heard people estimating
That's a
higher.
conservative
A
number,
conservative
yeah.
estimate. But it's a very small population, and the military can't, and their economy, their society can't sustain this. This like a campaign this long without any end in sight, without any concrete goals. Their soldiers need to, you know, rest, recuperate, wind down, rearm, reevaluate, relook at the strategies.
Is this not their longest engagement in combat in
I believe it is.
Israel's history?
In Israel's history, yes, I believe it is. And it also shows, obviously, look, they have a history of having ceasefires and negotiated agreements that work in stages. So they'll get their end of the bargain fulfilled early on in this stage progression.
And start the bombs.
And then start it again. Or then there'll be Hamas launched a rocket, we have to fight back, and we're just back to square one, essentially.
Because I've listened to a lot of pundits say that, you know, this is peace in the Middle East now, and I just think
yes, it's very
it's
peaceful.
quite delusional.
It's quite delusional. And I also think as well, just not to go on too big of a tangent, but I think they have to shift their policy in the Middle East now because Syria's gone.
Yeah.
So you have the Turkish, Qatari-backed proxy forces in Syria.
Yes.
And they, even though they have worked to Israeli interests, they are fundamentally a Turkish proxy, and they are going to reflect the neo-Ottoman aspirations of Erdogan and his current political streak that he's on in Turkey.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a point, and I've seen think pieces and articles debating and discussing this, are Turkey and Israel going to end up fighting for supremacy of the Eastern Mediterranean?
Yeah.
And whether that actually happens or not, but again, Israel has to stop and strategically reevaluate their position in the region and where they want to project force next. I think there is also, for example, the Egyptians have started to apparently have started to look at remilitarizing parts of the Sinai Peninsula. Because they have been getting pressured the entire time to accept all the Palestinian refugees, to which they have refused. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the military dictator of Egypt, they are one of the largest recipients of US aid. They are quite subservient to the empire. However, he's copped a lot of flack, his government has, over the last 15 months for not being harder against the Israelis. But as well, you have to remember, with the blockade on the Suez Canal, Egypt has been the number, like they've lost billions and billions of dollars in transfer fees, and they have their economy is in terrible shape. They've got a huge population. They could be directly benefiting from all this extra trade, but I think Sisi has seen what the opinion on the street is, and so he has kind of pulled back again, and he just kind of said, we'll let this happen. He doesn't want to piss off his domestic constituency. And he's also said, we're not taking the Palestinian refugees. You have to leave them in Palestine, in their land.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's necessarily out of like altruism.
Yeah.
But I think just sheer pragmatism, he's decided like just economically we can't afford them. But then again, you have to give the man credit because he has not done anything against the Yemenis to stop the blockade, for example. So I think he is trying to wait and see how the chips fall.
Yeah.
And I think there have been rumours about, for example, a potential change in government in Egypt, orchestrated by like the United States and the Empire. But I think if that was the case, we'd have someone that was a lot more amenable to their desires. So how it all plays out coming into 2025. Who knows, man?
Yeah. What I think is going to be really interesting, though, is that now that if the ceasefire holds and we do start to see the Gaza Strip being rebuilt, is watching the mainstream news services going in. So we're now going to see the BBC and CNN and potentially reporters from the ABC
Yes.
actually going in to Gaza and seeing the horrors firsthand. And I
Yes.
don't think any bulldozers that the Israeli use are going to be able to cover up the genocide that took place.
No, absolutely not.
Because we've seen a lot of aerial footage and we've seen first-hand footage coming from mobile phones, but we haven't seen a big major Western media company go in and actually do a segment on what life is like there now.
Exactly, and I think they will, and I think they'll kind of not, if they do, and if the stability holds
They'll
for long
whitewash it
enough,
as well.
they'll whitewash it, obviously,
But
and they won't politicise it, but there's a reality that cannot be brushed
Correct.
over.
The actual footage and the film from the horrors that have taken place, I don't think you can
No,
completely
there's no
whitewash
way.
it.
There's no way.
So that will be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
Hopefully the ceasefire does hold, though.
Yeah.
For the hostages, for the Israeli hostages, for the Palestinians that
Yep.
endured this ongoing genocide and
Yeah.
slaughter. So
And we'll see. We will continue to cover this,
Yeah.
as it unfolds.
yeah.
Mate, what a year ahead, just
It's-
quietly.
it's
We have
gonna be
an
a year.
absolute year ahead of us, mate.
Correct, that's right. And I was thinking next week, potentially, what we should have a look at is the incoming negotiations between Trump and Putin, because that seems to be ramping up as a potential ceasefire negotiation is held.
It will be interesting to see what happens.
Yep.
Battle of the Giga Chads.
Yes.
Who will out-Chad the other? I have a feeling I know who will, but we'll wait and see.
So, yeah.
Bloody oath.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone for joining us.
Like, comment, subscribe, everyone. We'll be working hard to bring you guys regular left hook content. Obviously, it's hard, but we'll be trying to get onto that into 2025.
And we're going to polish up our production a little bit.
Yeah,
do some live streams and try and talk to some other people as
Talk
well.
to some other people.
Make the content a bit more engaging and interesting for everyone.
Hit the street. I personally think it's very engaging and interesting. Hit the street. Yeah, we'll do a few more things. So thanks for everyone for sticking with you. We love you all. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
See you later. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.